gonna get shot! Put your hands up!
Keep your hands up!
Move that dog. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. On the ground. On the ground.
Car's
22,
clear,
we're
car's
taking
clear.
one into custody. She did ram our vehicle.
Women have committed a lot of deadly crimes in the United States, but in this video, we will cover the worst of all crimes committed by women, and it took them straight to execution. From kidnapping to murder, and even mothers killing their own babies. These crimes are merciless, and very brutal, so stay sharp as we get into them. First on the list, Taylor Renee Parker. On Friday, 9th of October, 2020, in New Boston, Texas. In one of the most disturbing crimes in recent Texas history, 27-year-old Taylor Renee Parker brutally murdered a pregnant woman, and cut her unborn child from her womb, then tried to pass the baby off as her own. The victim was Reagan Hancock, a 21-year-old mother who was 7.5 months pregnant with a baby girl she'd named Braxlyn. Reagan and Parker were acquaintances. Parker had attended Reagan's wedding and baby shower. For months leading up to the murder, Taylor had faked a pregnancy, using a fake ultrasound, baby bump prosthetics, and social media posts to convince her boyfriend and others she was expecting a child. Investigators later found that she'd even held a gender reveal party. On the morning of October 9th, Taylor drove to Reagan's home while Reagan's husband was at work, and her 3-year-old daughter was still asleep inside. Parker attacked Reagan with a hammer, fractured her skull, stabbed her multiple times, and ultimately cut the fetus from her abdomen with a scalpel. The baby did not survive. Parker then fled the scene with the child, and was pulled over 50 miles away in DeKalb, Texas, after driving erratically and claiming she had just given birth. Paramedics quickly realized something was wrong. Taylor had no signs of childbirth, and the baby was unresponsive. Back at the crime scene, Reagan's mother had found her daughter's butchered body, sparking an immediate investigation that led back to Parker. She was arrested and charged with capital murder for the death of Reagan Hancock, murder of an unborn child, kidnapping and assault. On the 9th of November, 2022, she was sentenced to death. And as of August 2025, Taylor Renee Parker is one of the 7 women on Texas death row, housed at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Lisa Leanne Graham. On the 5th of July, 2007, in Russell County, Alabama, 21-year-old Stephanie Shea Graham was found shot dead on a remote dirt road outside Phoenix City. She had been shot twice in the head and 4 times in the chest, then run over by the vehicle used in the murder. The body was discovered by a passerby, who alerted authorities. Investigators learned that the shooter was Kenneth Walton, a family acquaintance and former employee of her family's construction business. Prosecutors presented alarming evidence. Lisa Leanne Graham, Stephanie's mother, had hired Walton, providing him a 9mm pistol and detailed instructions. Stephanie had been in legal trouble, arrested in a drive-by shooting, and her parents had posted $100,000 bond. Prosecutors argued Lisa feared Stephanie would skip bail again and ruin finances. Witnesses and phone records placed Lisa and Walton together before the murder. She was arrested and convicted with capital murder. As of July 2025, Lisa Graham remains on Alabama's death row, imprisoned at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. Her execution has not been scheduled. Christa Pike. On the 12th of January, 1995, in Knoxville, Tennessee. Just after sunset, in a hidden wooded area, near the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer was begging for her life. But Christa Pike, just 18 years old at the time, showed no mercy. Alongside her boyfriend, Tatterall Shipp, and another acquaintance, Shadala Peterson, Christa lured Colleen out of the dorms of the Job Corps Center, a federally funded education program where they were all enrolled. Christa had grown increasingly paranoid and jealous, convinced Colleen was flirting with Shipp. Prosecutors would later describe it as an obsession spiraling into sadism. That night, under the guise of making peace, they convinced Colleen to walk with them into the woods. Once isolated, they ambushed her. For over 30 minutes, Colleen was beaten, carved with a box cutter, and had a pentagram etched into her chest. Her throat was slashed, and her skull was crushed with a chunk of asphalt. Christa kept a piece of Colleen's skull as a trophy, later bragging about the killing to fellow students. The autopsy revealed at least 50 wounds, many inflicted while Colleen was still alive. The motive was rage, jealousy, and cruelty. Christa Pike was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted especially aggravated robbery. On the 30th of March, 1996, she was sentenced to death, becoming the youngest woman sentenced to death in the United States in the modern era. Her boyfriend, Tadderel Shipp, who was 17 at the time of the killing, was sentenced to life in prison. Shadala Peterson, the third participant, testified against them and received probation. Since her conviction, Pike has remained incarcerated at the Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville. She has never expressed genuine remorse, and in 2001, she attempted to escape from death row, aided by a correctional officer she had a relationship with. The plot was hindered just days before it was to be carried out. As of August 2025, Christa Gale Pike remains the only woman on Tennessee's death row. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Tina Lasagna Brown. In Pensacola, Florida, the quiet of the night shattered on the 24th of March, 2010. 19-year-old Adriana Zimmerman, a young woman who had been in a relationship with Tina's nephew, and according to court testimony, had an ongoing dispute with Tina over personal matters, was lured into a car under false pretenses, promising her a ride. Tina Lasagna Brown, along with two accomplices, her daughter Brittany Angelique Brown, and her friend Heather Trine Lee, drove her into a dark area of Escambia County. That was where they beat Zimmerman in the back seat, first with fists, then with a crowbar. Records show that they took turns assaulting her, then dragged her into a ditch, where they set her on fire while she was still alive. Within days, they were arrested and charged. And on the 26th of October, 2012, she was formally sentenced to death by lethal injection. Heather Lee, who testified against Brown and Brittany, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a reduced sentence. She received 25 years. Brittany Brown, still a minor at the time of the crime, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As of now, Tina Lasagna Brown remains on Florida's death row at Lowell Correctional Institution, Annex in Ocala. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Tiffany Nicole Moss. On Monday, 28th of October 2013, 10-year-old Imani Gabrielle Moss was starved to death by her stepmother Tiffany Moss in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Tiffany and her father, Iman Moss, locked her up in a room. They withheld food and ignored her cries. Tiffany, the child's stepmother, was the primary abuser, according to both prosecutors and Imani's biological relatives. At the time of her death, she weighed 32 pounds, 15 kilograms, the weight of an average toddler. In April 2019, Tiffany, who represented herself in court, was convicted of all counts, and was sentenced to death on the 1st of May, 2019. She is currently incarcerated at the Arendelle State Prison, and is Georgia's only female death row inmate. Iman Moss, who had cooperated with investigators and testified, pleaded guilty in 2015. He received a life sentence without parole. As of August 2025, after 6 years on death row, Tiffany Moss's execution is yet to be scheduled. Virginia Susan Caudle. On Saturday, 15th of March 1998, in Lexington, Kentucky, 73-year-old widow, Lonetta Penman White, was found beaten to death in her home on Winter Garden Drive. The person behind it? Virginia Susan Caudle, who was 37 years old at the time, along with her boyfriend, Jonathan Wayne Goforth, a man with a long criminal record. That night, Susan and Goforth entered Lonetta's home to steal. Susan believed Lonetta had cash and valuables hidden in her home. Using a hammer, they beat her to death, repeatedly hitting her on the head and upper body. The autopsy later showed that she died from massive blunt force trauma. They then wrapped her body in a rug, threw it in the trunk of her car, and dumped it behind an abandoned house in a remote area of Clark County. By the time police found the car few days later, Lonetta's body was already decomposing. Susan was sentenced to death in March 2000. Jonathan Goforth was also sentenced to death the following year. As of August 2025, incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women in Pewee Valley, Virginia, Susan Caudle remains the only woman on Kentucky's death row, and she has been there for 25 years. Goforth died on death row on the 14th of June, 2025, while Susan, who exhausted her appeals in 2019, continues to await her execution. Robin Lee Rowe. On Monday, 10th of February, 1992, inside a quiet neighborhood in Boise, Idaho. At 4:45 a.m., flames engulfed the duplex on North 15th Street. Robin Lee Rowe set the house on fire, burning her 34-year-old husband Randy, and their 10-year-old son, Joshua, and 8-year-old daughter Tabitha. All three had died from carbon monoxide poisoning before the flames consumed them. Robin had recently taken out multiple life insurance policies, including one for $250,000 on her husband, and additional policies on the children. She was found guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder, and sentenced to death on the 16th of December, 1993, by Judge Alan Schwartzman. As of August 2025, after 32 years, Robin Lee Rowe remains the only woman on Idaho's death row. And though her death sentence was upheld in multiple appeals, she has no scheduled execution date. Lisa Joe Chamberlain. On Monday, 29th of March, 2004, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 29-year-old Roger Lee Gillett, Hewlett's cousin, and Roger's girlfriend, Lisa Joe Chamberlain, 31 at the time, were staying with 34-year-old Vernon Carl Hewlett, and his 36-year-old girlfriend Linda Marie Heinzelman, in Hewlett's house. When tensions erupted over stolen property and money, the couple devised a plan to kill them both. Hewlett was slashed on the throat and battered to death, while Linda was assaulted by Gillett with a beer bottle before she was beaten, stabbed, and finally suffocated to death with a plastic bag wrapped over her head. They were later arrested and convicted. On the 4th of August, 2006, Lisa Joe Chamberlain was sentenced to death by lethal injection, and she is the only woman on death row in Mississippi as of August 2025. Her boyfriend and co-defendant, Roger Gillett, was tried separately and also sentenced to death. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Blanch Taylor Moore. Between 1966 and 1989, a quiet trail of death followed Blanch Taylor Moore, a seemingly devout Baptist churchgoer and grocery store worker from North Carolina. Her victims were all men, all close, and all died, slowly, painfully, of mysterious illnesses. The method was arsenic poisoning. The first suspicious death was James Taylor, Blanch's husband of more than a decade. He died in 1973, allegedly of a heart attack. No autopsy was performed. Then came Raymond Reed, a grocery store manager and Blanch's longtime lover. In April 1986, Reed fell violently ill and was hospitalized in Burlington. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, until it was too late. He died on the 7th of October, 1986. At the time, his death was attributed to Guillain-Barré syndrome. 3 years later, in 1989, Blanch was preparing to marry another man, Reverend Dwight Moore, a respected Baptist minister in Alamance County. Just days after their wedding, Dwight suddenly became ill, after Blanch cooked him a homemade meal. He nearly died, experiencing hair loss, gastrointestinal failure, and weight loss. He was hospitalized at UNC hospitals in Chapel Hill. Toxicology tests revealed 20 times the normal level of arsenic in his system. Doctors immediately notified authorities. An investigation was launched, and the truth unraveled quickly. The exhumation of Raymond Reed's body showed he had also died of arsenic poisoning, with levels more than 60 times the normal amount. Blanch was arrested on the 18th of July, 1989, and charged with Reed's murder. On the 14th of November, 1990, Blanch Taylor Moore was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Although she was only convicted for Reed's death, investigators strongly suspected her involvement in several others, including her father, Parker Kaiser, and first husband, James Taylor, both of whom died under suspiciously similar circumstances. Blanch Taylor Moore's case became one of the most infamous in North Carolina history. She was dubbed by the media as the Black Widow of North Carolina. As of August 2025, Blanch Taylor Moore remains on North Carolina's death row, housed at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. Now 92 years old, her execution has still not been scheduled. Carlet Elizabeth Parker. On Tuesday, 12th of May, 1998, in Raleigh, North Carolina, 86-year-old Alice Covington vanished without explanation after a routine grocery store trip. Covington had been seen in a parking lot with Carlet Elizabeth Parker, a former nurse's aide who had once worked for her. Later that day, Parker drove Covington to a First Union bank, where she coerced her into withdrawing $2,500 from her savings account. Surveillance footage captured Parker hovering closely over the elderly woman as she filled out the forms. After the withdrawal, both women left together. Alice Covington was never seen alive again. Her body was discovered 2 days later on the 14th of May, 1998, inside her own car, abandoned in a remote field in Morrisville, North Carolina. She had been drowned, likely in a bathtub, before being dumped in the car. The autopsy revealed bruising on her arms and face, and water in her lungs, confirming death by asphyxiation. Investigators also found a stun gun and pepper spray in Parker's possession, tools she had used to restrain her. Carlet Elizabeth Parker was convicted in November 1999 and sentenced to death. As of August 2025, she remains on death row at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. Over 2 decades later, Parker's execution date has not been scheduled. Tossie Vixen. On the 22nd of September, 1993, in Toledo, Ohio, 22-year-old Christopher Hammer lived with his friends Timothy Hoffner and Archie Dixon. What began as companionship soon turned into a horrifying crime. On that morning, Hoffner and Dixon lured Hammer back to Dixon's girlfriend's home, under false pretense. And right there, they beat him severely, Dixon with a wine bottle, while Hoffner was restraining him in a headlock. After robbing him of his cash, ID, and social security card, they tied Christopher to a bunk bed ladder, blindfolded and gagged him, and moved him to a remote wooded area. They buried him alive in a shallow grave while he pleaded for mercy. The autopsy concluded that he suffocated beneath the dirt, alive, for the first minutes of his grave. They later forged documents to obtain Hammer's car title under his name and sold the vehicle. In 2001, Hoffner was convicted of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, forgery, and the death penalty was imposed. The Ohio Supreme Court unanimously upheld her convictions and sentence in July 2004. She was sentenced under the name Timothy Hoffner and transitioned while on Ohio's death row. Tossie Vixen's execution was scheduled to happen on the 29th of May, 2019, but was stayed and repeatedly postponed. Donna Marie Roberts. On the 11th of December, 2001, in Howland Township, Ohio, 57-year-old Robert Fingerhut had just returned home from his job, managing a Greyhound bus station when he was ambushed and shot to death in his own home. He was shot twice in the head and once in the chest. Detectives discovered that Donna Marie Roberts, Robert Fingerhut's ex-wife and the co-owner of the house, had left the door unlocked, and was still living with Robert at the time, despite being divorced. But she was also secretly involved with another man, Nate Jackson, a convicted felon who had just been released from a Florida prison. Investigators uncovered a disturbing conspiracy. While Jackson was in prison, Roberts had sent him dozens of letters, some explicit, others incriminating. They included discussions of money, life insurance, and one haunting line: "There's only one way he'll ever be out of our lives." After Jackson's release, Roberts bought him clothes, paid for his travel, and helped him re-enter Ohio. On the night of the murder, surveillance and phone records placed him near the crime scene. In a shocking twist, police discovered destroyed evidence in Roberts' car, shredded letters, and even a shower curtain believed to have been used during the crime. In June 2003, Donna Marie Roberts was found guilty on all counts. She became the first woman sentenced to death in Ohio since the state reinstated capital punishment. Her lover, Nathaniel Jackson, was tried separately, convicted, and also sentenced to death. To this day, she remains the only woman on Ohio's death row, housed at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville. As of August 2025, Donna Marie Roberts has no scheduled execution date. Brenda Andrew. On Tuesday, 20th of November, 2001, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Brenda had been having an affair with James Pavitt, a former insurance agent and Sunday school teacher. Together, they planned to murder Brenda's husband, Robert Andrew, and collect over $800,000 in life insurance benefits. The scheme was carefully laid out. In the months leading up to the murder, Brenda manipulated Robert into reinstating a lapsed life insurance policy, one in which James Pavitt was the issuing agent and Brenda the primary beneficiary. Then, on the 20th of November, 2001, Robert was lured to Brenda's home under the pretense of picking up the children for Thanksgiving. The children were conveniently absent. Right there, Brenda and Pavitt ambushed him in the garage. He was shot once in the shoulder and then fatally in the face with a shotgun blast. Brenda suffered a superficial gunshot wound to her arm, deliberately staged to support their fabricated story of a home invasion. They told police a masked gunman had attacked them. But inconsistencies in their story unraveled quickly. Forensic evidence, the life insurance trail, and witness testimony linked them directly to the plot. On the 4th of February, 2004, Brenda Andrew was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to death. Her co-defendant and lover, James Pavitt, was also convicted and sentenced to death in a separate trial. To this day, she remains the only woman on Oklahoma's death row, incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center, awaiting execution. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. On the 17th of February, 2007, in Harlingen, Texas. Emergency responders were called to the apartment of Melissa Elizabeth Lucio, a 38-year-old mother of 14, after a 911 report that her daughter, Mariah Alvarez, a 2-year-old toddler, and her 12th child, was unresponsive and not breathing. Mariah was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The cause? A fatal head trauma. But doctors also noted disturbing signs. Bruises in various stages of healing. A broken arm that had not been treated. A pattern of injuries suggesting repeated physical abuse. Lucio told paramedics that Mariah had fallen down the stairs 2 days earlier. But the authorities quickly suspected more. After 7 hours of intense police interrogation, without a lawyer present, Lucio admitted to spanking and hitting Mariah, though she never explicitly confessed to murder. Her statements were taken as a confession, and she was immediately arrested for capital murder. On the 10th of July, 2008, Lucio was found guilty and sentenced to death, becoming the first Latina woman ever sent to death row in Texas. In April 2022, just 2 days before her scheduled execution, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals issued a stay, allowing new evidence to be considered. As of August 2025, Melissa Lucio remains on Texas death row, incarcerated at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville. No new execution date has been scheduled. Darlie Lynn Peck Rudier. On the 6th of June, 1996, in Rowlett, Texas. Darlie Rudier, a 26-year-old mother of 3, called 911. Somebody came in, they stabbed me and my babies. When police arrived, they found a horrific crime scene inside the Rudier home. 2 young boys, 5-year-old Damon and 6-year-old Devin Rudier, lay in pools of blood on the floor of the living room. Both had been stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife. Darlie herself had a deep gash across her throat, cuts on her arms, and blood covering her nightshirt. She told police an intruder had broken into the home, attacked her and the boys, then fled into the night. Her husband, Darren Rudier, had been asleep upstairs with their 7-month-old son and was unharmed. At first, the story sparked sympathy, but cracks formed quickly. Investigators noted, no sign of forced entry. A bloody sock found 85 yards away, believed to be planted. Darlie's wounds described by doctors as superficial and likely self-inflicted. Most controversially, surveillance footage showed Darlie laughing and spraying silly string during a birthday memorial for Devon, just 8 days after the murders. Prosecutors later played this in court as a damning symbol of cold-bloodedness. Still, there was no confession, no eyewitnesses, and no clear motive. On the 1st of February, 1997, Darlie was convicted of capital murder. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As of August 2025, Darlie Lin Rudier remains on Texas death row, held at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Linda Anita Cardi. On the 16th of May, 2001, in Houston, Texas. Linda Anita Cardi, a 43-year-old former schoolteacher and DEA informant, orchestrated a plot to steal a newborn baby by having the mother, Joanna Rodriguez, murdered. Joanna Rodriguez, a 20-year-old mother who had recently given birth to a baby boy named Ray, lived with her partner, Raymond Carlos Williams, and was targeted because Linda believed she had drugs and a newborn she could take. On the night of 15th to 16th of May, 2001, 3 men, Gerald Anderson, Carlos Williams, not the partner, and Chris Robinson, burst into Joanna's apartment posing as DEA agents. They beat Raymond and forced Joanna and her baby into a car, delivering them to a nearby storage unit rented by Cardi under a false name. Right there, Joanna was killed. Her baby boy was recovered alive, wrapped in a blanket in a nearby vehicle. Cardi was arrested the next day. On the 19th of February, 2002, Linda Cardi was convicted and sentenced to death by lethal injection. She became the first British citizen sentenced to death in the U.S. in nearly 20 years and remains the only British woman on American death row. As of August 2025, Linda Anita Cardi remains on Texas death row, housed at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Erica Ivonne Shepard. On Wednesday, 30th of June, 1993, in Houston, Texas. 19-year-old Erica Ivonne Shepard and James Dickerson, an ex-convict and gang member, robbed and killed Marilyn Marr, a 43-year-old mother and legal assistant. Posing as stranded strangers, they knocked on her door pretending to need help. Once inside, they brutally attacked and stabbed her in the neck and upper chest with a 10-inch kitchen knife. When that failed to kill her, they used a plastic bag and a lamp cord to suffocate her. Her 3-year-old daughter was found in the home, traumatized but physically unharmed. They stole her Lexus and drove off, using the car to commit other robberies in the following days. Police launched an immediate manhunt. Dickerson was shot and killed by police less than a week later. Shepard was captured on the 6th of July, 1993, while hiding under a bed at a friend's apartment in Houston. She was charged with capital murder, and in March 1995, she was sentenced to death by lethal injection, becoming one of the youngest women ever sent to death row in the state. As of August 2025, Erica Ivonne Shepard remains on Texas death row, housed at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville. She has no scheduled execution date. Brittany Marlo Halberg. On the 13th of November, 1996, in Amarillo, Texas. 80-year-old A.B. Towery Sr., a retired Air Force veteran and widower, was murdered by 23-year-old Brittany Marlo Halberg, a former sex worker, in his house. He found her doing drugs in his house and an altercation erupted, leading to a fight. According to Brittany, he pulled her hair, and she lost it, then stabbed him. She claimed self-defense, but the sheer extent of the violence, along with the theft of his wallet, credit cards, and vehicle, suggested something far more calculated. She fled the state and was arrested 4 days later in Memphis, Tennessee, hiding at a friend's apartment. On the 27th of March, 1998, Brittany was found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As of August 2025, Brittany Marlo Halberg remains on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Kimberly Diane Cargill. On the 18th of June, 2010, in Smith County, Texas. Kimberly murdered her son's mentally challenged babysitter, 39-year-old Cherry Walker, by asphyxiation. To prevent the victim from testifying against her in a child protective case, Kimberly had dumped Cherry Walker's body, doused it in lighter fluid and set it on fire. She was arrested and charged with capital murder, and sentenced to death in 2012. As of August 2025, Kimberly Diane Cargill is currently on Texas death row, housed at the Patrick O'Daniel unit, in Gatesville. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Christy Michelle Scott. On the 16th of August, 2008, in Russellville, Alabama. Scott started a fire at her home, resulting in the death of her 6-year-old son, Mason Scott. Investigations revealed that Christy had bought a $100,000 insurance policy on her son, the afternoon before his death. Scott was arrested on suspicion of killing her son for the collection of insurance money. On the 5th of August, 2009, she was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. As of August 2025, Christy Michelle Scott remains on Alabama's death row, housed at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Patricia Blackman. On the 29th of May, 1999, in Dothan, Alabama. 29-year-old Patricia Blackman called 911 saying, "I need an ambulance, the baby's not breathing." When emergency responders arrived at the modest home in Dothan, they found 2-year-old Dominica Bryant, her adopted daughter, barely clinging to life. Her tiny body was covered in bruises, her skull fractured, and her pupils unresponsive. She was rushed to a hospital, where she died shortly after arrival. What at first appeared to be a tragic accident, a possible fall or medical emergency, quickly turned into a homicide investigation. Autopsy results revealed that Dominica had suffered over a dozen blunt force injuries to her head and body. Police reported inconsistencies in Patricia's account. At first, she claimed Dominica had fallen from a small plastic chair. But the forensic evidence didn't match. Investigators found blood stains on the walls, a broken stick believed to have been used in the beating, and signs of previous abuse. She was arrested and charged with capital murder during the course of child abuse. On the 7th of March, 2002, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. As of August 2025, Patricia Blackman remains on Alabama's death row, housed at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka. Her execution date has not been scheduled. Tierra Capri Gobble. On the 15th of December, 2004, in Dothan, Alabama. 4-month-old Phoenix Cody Parrish was discovered unresponsive in the home of his mother, Tierra Capri Gobble. The infant suffered a skull fracture, broken ribs, 2 broken wrists, and extensive bruising, injuries consistent with severe physical abuse over time. Child Welfare had previously removed both of Gobble's children after finding evidence of neglect and abuse. Despite a court-ordered separation, Gobble's great-uncle permitted her to move in with him, violating agency instructions. Gobble admitted to striking Phoenix multiple times when he wouldn't stop crying, claiming frustration and fatigue, but medical evidence showed the death was neither accidental nor isolated. She was charged with capital murder and sentenced to death on the 26th of October, 2005. Tierra Capri Gobble remains on Alabama's death row, with no execution scheduled. Heather Level Keaton. Between 4th of March and 20th of June, 2010, in Mobile County, Alabama, 4-year-old Natalie Alexis DeBlaise and 3-year-old Chase DeBlaise died as a result of abuse by their father John DeBlaise and their stepmother, Heather Level Keaton. Natalie died first, on the 4th of March, while Chase died on the 20th of June. Witnesses later reported prolonged abuse. Natalie was allegedly gagged and locked in a suitcase, while Chase was taped, gagged, and forced to stand all night. Their bodies were discovered separately, months after disappearance, Natalie in Alabama, and Chase in Mississippi. John and Level Keaton were both arrested, found guilty of the murder of both kids, and sentenced to death. As of mid-2025, Level Keaton remains on Alabama's death row, at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka, awaiting execution. Wendy Elizabeth Andriano. On the 8th of October, 2000. In Ahwatukee, Phoenix, Arizona. Wendy Andriano severely beat her 33-year-old husband Joe to death with a bar stool and stabbed him in the neck in the couple's apartment. His autopsy revealed that he had sustained 23 blows to the skull, and traces of sodium azide were found in his system. Approximately 1 hour before Joe's murder, Wendy called 911 claiming that her terminally ill husband was dying. When paramedics arrived, Wendy turned them away, stating that Joe had a do not resuscitate order and that his wish was to die. Paramedics left the house, and after 1 hour, Wendy called again, reporting that she had stabbed and beaten her husband to death in self-defense. She also made claims that her husband was physically and psychologically abusive toward her. However, Joe, too weak from chemotherapy and the sodium azide poisoning, was unable to defend himself. Wendy was charged with murder, and on the 22nd of December, 2004, she was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As of August 2025, Wendy remains incarcerated at the Lumley unit of the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville. No execution date has been scheduled. Shauna Ford. On the 30th of May, 2009, in Arivica, Arizona. Shauna Ford, co-founder of the vigilante group Minuteman American Defense, MAD, orchestrated a deadly home invasion, targeting 29-year-old Raul Jr. Flores, an alleged local marijuana trafficker, and his 9-year-old daughter, Brazenia Ileana Flores. Ford and her accomplices, including Jason Eugene Bush and Albert Gaxiola, gained entry under the pretense of official authority. They robbed the home expecting to find drugs or cash. When nothing was found, Raul and Brazenia were both shot and killed. Raul's wife, Gina Gonzalez, was also shot but pretended to be dead until the intruders fled. She survived and later provided key eyewitness testimony, identifying Ford, and connecting text messages and stolen jewelry to her. She was arrested, and on the 22nd of February, 2011, the court formally sentenced Shauna Ford to death by lethal injection. As of mid-2025, she remains incarcerated at the Lumley unit of Arizona's prison complex in Perryville, awaiting her execution. Samantha Allen. On the 12th of July, 2011, in Phoenix, Arizona. 10-year-old Aim Lynn Deal, a vulnerable child living with her aunt and legal guardian Cynthia Stoltzman, was found deceased inside a cramped plastic footlocker in a hot garage of a shared house. She had suffocated after being forced inside as punishment. 23-year-old Samantha Allen, Cynthia's daughter, and her husband John Allen were charged after they confessed that Aim Lynn Deal was locked inside the box for taking a popsicle without permission. Aim's death was part of long-term abuse. She had endured forced exercise, food deprivation, and physical violence over months. The box measured only about 3 feet deep, barely enough room for Aim's photo frame. On the 7th of August, 2017, Samantha Allen was formally sentenced to death. In addition, she received a concurrent 74-year sentence for related child abuse charges. As of August 2025, she continues to await execution at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville, with her sentence intact. Lin Micho. On the 2nd of December, 1997, in Pleasanton, California. 22-year-old Vanessa Leigh Sampson was walking to her job at an insurance office when she was kidnapped by Lin Micho and her partner James Anthony DeVeggio in Micho's green Dodge minivan. They drove Vanessa to a remote area near Lake Tahoe, stripping down and forcibly sexually torturing her using modified curling irons with a rubber ball gag blocking her screams. The couple later strangled her to death with a rope, dumping her body in the snow along Highway 88 in Alpine County, where it was discovered 2 days later. Investigators found Micho's fingerprints on the instruments of torture, Vanessa's DNA on the gag and in the van, plus a criminal pattern. The pair had assaulted multiple young women in uncharged incidents. A 13-year-old friend of Micho's daughter and other victims testified in court. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Lin Micho remains on California's death row at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Her execution has not been fixed. Valerie D Martin. On the 28th of March, 2003, in Lancaster, Los Angeles County, 35-year-old Valerie D Martin conspired with 3 accomplices including her 16-year-old son, a 14-year-old boy, and an ex-convict Christopher Kenny, to kidnap and murder her 61-year-old boyfriend, William Whiteside. They assaulted him with a wooden stick and bat, inflicting approximately 28 to 29 blows, and struck him until he fell unconscious. They forced him into his car trunk, drove to a hidden area, poured gasoline to the vehicle, and set it ablaze, killing William Whiteside through smoke inhalation and burning. Valerie D Martin, along with her co-defendants, was tried and convicted. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection on the 26th of March, 2010. As of mid-2025, no execution date has been scheduled, and she remains on California's death row. Moren McDermott. On the 28th of April, 1985, in Van Nuys, California, Moren McDermott, then a registered nurse, paid a coworker, Jimmy Luna, offering him $50,000 to kill Stephen Matthew Eldridge, her roommate and co-owner of their house. Both had purchased $100,000 life insurance policies on each other just months earlier. Luna recruited 2 helpers, Marvin and Dondell Lee, to assist. Eldridge was stabbed 44 times, including the cutting of his penis post-mortem to mimic a homosexual murder and deflect investigation. After the murder, Moren collected the home and the insurance money, prompting swift police suspicion and arrest. She was convicted and sentenced to death. Today, Moren McDermott remains on California's death row, held at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Her execution remains pending. Thank you for staying to the end. If you like this video, and want to see more like this, where we uncover the deep crimes happening in the United States, I would be more than happy to see you subscribe to this channel. Like this video, and turn on the notification bell, to be notified when the next one drops tomorrow.